If they had technology on building that we didn't have, and we're just catching up to the days of Noah, all of a sudden we should understand the days of Noah is that we should learn about everything we can
Yeah.
about what happened leading into the flood. And then, let's say, for the first 100 years or so after the flood and with the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah, because it's going to be like that.
Broadcasting seeds. Broadcasting seeds. Planting truth in the minds of the people.
All right, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Broadcasting Seeds. I am your host, Bennett Tanton, and today we have a return guest, no other than Gary Wayne. Gary, for the people who are new, but I don't know how somebody couldn't see you at this point, but the people that don't know who you are, give us like the 30,000 foot view of what it is you do.
Well, first of all, thank you for inviting me back. So happy to be with you again. And
Absolutely.
it's amazing how much anonymity I actually have. So,
Right.
so happy to introduce myself to people who aren't familiar with who I am. And I'm an author. I have 3 books on the market currently, and more on the way. And I label myself a Christian contrarian and a researcher. And so how I come about that is I tend not to accept what people say they saw. I like to verify things for myself as best as I can because I like to know why I believe what I believe. And I found the wisdom of the world in normal, reliable sources are not so wise and not so reliable over the years. And that if you really want to understand the picture, you got to dig deeper and go below the surface. So that's kind of who I am. And I've written the 3 books: The Genesis 6 Conspiracy, Part 1, How Secret Societies and the Descendants of Giants Plan to Enslave Humankind. And that was the first book, and it kind of changed the conversation on so many things out there. And it sells more books every year, so it's still resonating and gaining in popularity after a decade. Part 2 is more targeted towards Christians. It's the Genesis 6 Conspiracy Part 2, how understanding prehistory and giants helps to understand end time prophecy. And this book is a book, if you've not gone deep into the Bible, it's going to take you so deep, you're not sure
Oh my
where you
Made
are
my
at
head
times.
spin,
Yeah.
frankly. But it changed my whole, anyway.
Yeah, so it's designed to link prehistory with prophecy, and in a way that's different than book 1 does. It's on the same topics kind of, but it's new material. And if you're familiar with book 1 or you're familiar with some of the things we talk about, it's book 1 on steroids for Christians, and it's Dr. Heiser on steroids for Christians. And so if you really want to go nerdy, then this is how you can have
Yeah.
overwhelming information on arguments for questions that people are going to ask. And I'm also going to demonstrate my eschatology in that book so that people have a better way of approaching scripture than all the standard sort of approaches, which all end up with contradictions and things they can't explain. And they have to add to scripture and a whole bunch of other different things. If you're tired of that, this book is going to help you with. And book 3 is the Oprimo Conspiracy, AI's Covenant with Babylon, that released April 1st. And it is a fiction novel designed by myself and the publisher to take my research mainstream and connecting prehistory to how it helps define and help understand end time prophecy, and to show my chronology of the end time, which will eliminate the contradictions for people if they want to do the work to put it in that way. And if you're like me, I accepted the standard chronologies, approaches, and then I started asking the critical questions on each of them. And none of them could answer those questions in terms of why doesn't that agree with all of these passages?
Right.
And so if you're tired of doing that, you might wanna look at my research. So I do not have a university degree. I'm not a minister. I do not have a seminary degree. I didn't have a platform before I wrote book 1. I'd never written a book before, and so I'm a kind of a guy who comes at it completely different with fresh eyes and more from a layman's perspective, but do not underestimate the quality of my research because it blows most people away.
I would agree. Yeah, for sure. And I think that perspective is key because you weren't really I'll use the word tainted when you went into it.
Yeah. Well,
So,
I was to a certain degree, but I wanted to learn more things on my own, and I wanted to get to the sources. Um, and when I started to in book 1, I decided I wanted to let the seculars and the polytheists speak for themselves. So I didn't go directly to the sources in a lot of cases. I used them and their sources and let them speak in their own words so that people could not say I manipulated something. In book 2, I go right to the sources. So if I want to talk about, the book of Enoch or something that Hesiod wrote, I go right to the source and quote it right from the sources so that there isn't any sort of dispute. And it's so well annotated and the bibliographies are so large is that they are a key addition to somebody's research if they want to learn more about things. So you can test the veracity, but then you can also get the sources yourself. So
right.
it's a unique sort of way. And I tend to go deeper than most other people, both in my books and the writings. And if you've never read one of my books, you have no idea how much information is in there and it does never stops coming.
No.
So you have to,
And you pared it back at that.
yeah. Yeah,
Wow.
I took over 300 pages out of book 1 to get it down to a size to publish, so
It's
I took a
amazing.
large publishing book out just to get this thing published, but
Yeah.
so you have to read it as you can absorb it, because and again, you're gonna be challenged on a lot of things, but you're gonna see the patterns form as the book
Mm.
unfolds, and so that's why I wrote those large books with the research, try to do it in an interesting way, and in mini chapters so that you can read a chapter a night if that's all you wanted to do. So,
Yeah.
average 4 to 5 pages and let that sink in and then move on. But understand book 1 has 98 chapters in it. It might as well be
Yeah,
100 because
eat it one, bite at a time because 'cause
yeah.
you're not eating that elephant. That
Yeah. Yeah,
no,
no, and if you try and speed read it, I think it might blow some brain cells up or you just
right.
or you just
Yes,
won't absorb anything.
for sure.
And no loose sentences. Every sentence has information in it. That's important.
Yeah. Um, so, all right, head in that direction, you bring up patterns, and that's what I do on this podcast. I really like to show the
Yeah.
patterns, but starting this off, especially for some people that haven't maybe heard things, is why do you think Genesis 6 is one of the most important
Yeah.
and most avoided passages in the Bible?
It is the most dangerous passage in the whole Bible for those who run this world and the world order. And it's any information related to that has to be controlled because Genesis 6 not only has the flood story in it, which is in all cultures, all religions, all continents around the world, and who knows what we'll find in Antarctica, but it has the
Yeah,
creation
yeah.
of the giants and the establishment of the nobility, both before and after the flood, as it implications overflow, so to speak, into the post-Diluvian world. And that elite, Elim, Elites, and understand they control the languages, they control everything we have, controlling the top 2 classes pretty much from the beginning. They do everything in plain sight. So when they talk about themselves as the elites, understand that that word El is the Hebrew word for an angel or a god. And understand that they take their genealogies back to these celestial mafia godfathers, the
That's
disloyal
one of my
angels.
favorite phrases that you say. I love it.
Yeah. And so The original form would be Elim, and I am is the international ancient suffix for the majestic bloodline of the gods. So when you hear the word Nephilim in association with giants, understand that comes from a watcher like a seraphim, I am plural, cherubim, I am male plural. It's that majestic sort of bloodline, and it's also the male plural in Hebrew. So when they say elite as an ite, or uh, in the original form would be Elim, that means the god ones. It's an association with the gods. And just as Rex Deus is one of their titles, it's Kings of God, Royale is a transliteration of Kings of God. Roy for Old French, going back to um, regal, and words associated with regal in Latin, regalis, for example, and then back to the language of the giants, Proto-Indo-European, Proto-Indo-Aryan, and Sanskrit. And there are other variations of it with the 5 different tribes of the Indo-Aryans, but these are the giant tribes, and it's reg, R-E-G, that comes out of for a ruler, out of the giant languages. And so these are the kings of God. A-E-L is transliterated as A-L, as in like Baal for Lord God. Some people say husband God or master God, but different nuances to the same word. But in the secret societies, they understand it as Lord God, which is why they like Lord in the Bible. Lord God as the term. So again, look for their influences. Doesn't mean that God isn't Lord God, but not as they understand it. And so you also have transliterations of IL, ILU, and variations like that, all for angel or a god in all of, most of the Middle East nations. So Royale are the kings of God.
Awesome. Yes. Amazing. So, okay. So with that being said, the theory is, and I know that this is the theory is that the ancient pantheons across the world were not just imaginary gods, but different cultural memories of fallen angels, watchers, and their offspring.
Yeah.
Am I on the right track there?
You are, and the ancient pantheon is the same pantheon in all polytheist religions. They have different vernacular names or cultural names or linguistic names for those gods, but you also have to understand the history of how this sort of works to get a better understanding of it. So if you don't understand that there was a flood, and then you don't understand that there was different gods that ruled before the flood and other gods after the flood, then you're not going to be able to make sense of things. You're going to get a lot of contradictions. So parent gods ruled before the flood, and you would have gods, let's say in the Greek mythology, as Kronos and Gaia, as the parent god and goddess, as the queen of heaven and the king of heaven, so to speak. And after the flood, you're going to have Zeus as the offspring god. If you move over to the Canaanite pantheon, you're going to have El and Ashtaroth as the 2 before the flood. Then after the flood, it's Baal and Anat. If you're going to move, and I won't go through all of them, but like Ra is before the flood in Egypt, it's Osiris and his consort. I don't want to say the name because you're on YouTube.
Yeah, no, right, exactly. Yes, I know. I got you. Thank you.
But this is duplicated all over the world, and these are the same gods. So Baal is Zeus. El is Kronos. El
Those
is
thunder gods,
Anu.
because like Zeus, also that's Thor.
Yes.
So let me ask you real quick though, just to clarify, because a lot of people get confused.
Yeah.
So there's the parent gods, which is the four, and these are the stories as old as time, right?
Yeah.
Literally, like, and everyone knows these stories.
Yep.
Before flood, parent gods.
Yep.
After the flood, you have like Zeus, Baal, like you just said, the same God. But what are they?
Well, they're fallen angels, and so
that's what I was looking for.
yeah.
Perfect.
And here's how we should understand it through polytheism of the world: is that word hierarchy. And there's a hierarchy within God's council of angels and the council of the gods, as we understand that term in polytheism, or the council of gods in Psalms 82 that rules over the 70 nations as detailed in Deuteronomy 32. And so that word hierarchy is a Greek word based, that means sacred assembly of archons,
Mm.
right? And
Yeah,
this is,
yeah, it says it right there.
yeah, so they're telling us, and from a Greek perspective, that was Mount Olympus,
Yeah.
right? Where that sacred hierarchy of archons reign from, and both before and after the flood. Well, Mount Hermon is the Middle East one for the land of the
Mhm.
covenant and most of the nations around the world. And the only way where you get into a debate on which is the holy mountain is that the cultures all have their own holy mountains as they develop downstream. So the question is how many were there in the beginning? And I would say 7 or 8, and likely 8. One is the main one, and then 7 for the mighty 7 Satans, or the 7 wandering stars, or however you want to call that, in whichever
Yeah.
sort of monotheistic or polytheistic lens that you want to talk about. So again, we have the same story, same hierarchy, same gods, same polytheist history as the monotheist history, separated only by the lens of monotheism and polytheism that's on all continents, all around the world, in all cultures, all religions, and that cannot be adequately explained through what the seculars, so-called seculars, tell us about history,
Yes.
or through mathematics. It is literally mathematically impossible. And that's just the start of all the things that are mathematically impossible unless there's a pattern there. And the pattern is what is the same pattern in all cultures, and we should take them at face value.
Mm.
And I'm not saying there isn't things that are added into different cultural accounts, but the common denominators, we can assemble those, and then we can look at what the common denominators are in the Bible. And now we have something that I think is more firm.
Yes, because it's one of those things, like, I see, because I mean, yeah, you can go to any, I mean, Greeks, Sumerians,
Yeah,
Canaanites, Norse, Hindu,
yeah,
the Mayans and Incans even, and
yeah,
the Chinese, because a lot of people don't talk about, like, the Asian side of this, and you just keep seeing all these things, that the pattern, the rhyming,
yeah.
the sky beings, divine kings, giants,
Our people.
hybrid creatures, and God's mating with
Yeah,
humans. You see that in all of it. And then on top of that, not just mating with humans, but mating with animals and
yeah,
nature.
yeah.
And so, moving from there, you get the demigods, which are the offspring,
Right.
or what you would say is Nephilim at its basic area, right?
Yeah, it's the disembodied spirits for the most part as it evolves to of the
Yep.
giants.
Gotcha.
And the disembodied spirit is the spirit that is passed on to the being that is partly of this world and partly of heaven, which is, so the spirit aspect is somehow passed on in this process. And so originally they were immortal gods, demigods before the flood, both physically and spiritually, until God restricts that, because it's a violation against the laws of creation and against the Holy Spirit. So in Genesis 6:3, he limits all life in the flesh to 120 years, but the
Mhm.
spirit is still immortal. So when the body dies, it's either going to roam the earth as a daemon spirit, devil spirit, as the KGV calls it, that Jesus is dealing with as he's dispossessing people,
Yep.
and it's not to be confused with diablos for the devil. That's why the devil in the KGV is a bad translation. There should be daemon directly, and they're also described as evil spirits and unclean spirits, and they're used interchangeably in those accounts. So originally they were the divine representatives. They were the visible physical ones ruling on the earth in their own thrones, replicating the thrones of the council of the gods on earth. But when they became physically mortal and their body started to die, these become as we understand them as sheds, or shay as in the
Right. Yes.
Sidhe, or Rapha spirits as they would be understood after the flood. And they are not happy because they are either going to the pit prison, or they're going to have to roam and they can't rest, and they're not where they want to be with their gods in Hades or Sheol. So in the Old Testament, in Deuteronomy 32:17 and Psalms 106:37, you have these devils that are translated in the KJV that are being worshiped, that were not told to worship, which seems to be kind of unique from the host of heaven we're told not to, which would be the fallen
Yeah.
angels, as being the army of angels. So the host of heaven as the rebellious gods, which all have a star and a planet associated with them, but all angels have a star associated with them. This is the Hebrew word shed, or for shade, right?
Yeah.
So these
Gotcha.
are
Yeah.
disembodied spirits of the giants, and it's defined as a daemon, a devil, and a demon. As you take
All
that
three.
back to the Hebrew. So there's no doubt what's being talked about. And if it's not that as being the dead as the ghost, it's the Rapha. Is there a distinction? Perhaps. I'm not quite sure I can find consistency to determine what the distinction is, but in the occult, there's probably always distinctions. But it could be the Rapha are just the giants produced after the flood versus before the flood, because Rephaim are shown there. And so you also have some other devils, which are the satyrs, that are also used twice in the Old Testament. So we have to understand that, first of all, the giants were the direct offspring, both before the flood and after the flood, of the gods, and ruling with their mythos and their full authority, the divine right to rule that they receive from the council of the gods. And so they take on a god mythos of the god that is sponsoring them through their genealogical heritage.
They're celestial mafia
Must be a
godfather
godfathers, yes.
as part of the, as
Yes.
part of the Cosa Nostra of the spiritual
Yes.
world, right?
And
So,
from the matriarchal blood, and understand that after the flood, the fertility goddess Nin, or Nin Sun, you'll see that transliterated two different ways, produces with King Lugalbanda a giant named Gilgamesh. So you
mm,
have
yep.
celestial mafia godmothers as well, as it's understood in the fairy allegory versus the dragon allegory for the patriarchal bloodline.
Wow.
So, but after they die, after they become mortal, they haunt a lot of the locations that they used to rule, and they're very upset because they can't interact physically and they want to rest, and the only thing they can do is possess people to do that. So people began to do rituals and sacrifices to these demigods to pacify them. And this was understood in Greek worship as hero worship.
Mm.
So again, it's the same story from a polytheistic side to the warning that we get in Deuteronomy and Psalms not to sacrifice to these shades, right? Because they're not God, and they're not even full
Yeah.
fallen
Right.
angels, right?
Yeah.
And so they're also known in, let's say, China as the vagabond demon gods, right?
Right.
And again, they used to do talibans and do things on their doors, and bonfires and all sorts of things, just as they do in polytheist rituals all around the world to ward off these evil spirits. So again, you see
Yeah.
the commonality of this understanding all around the world, and just called different things. But again, even though stingy, we get enough in the Bible, if we understand it deep enough, to tell us what's going on here and who they are.
Yeah. Hmm. Man, it does get complex, but it's also very simple. I mean, I think it's the understanding is the simple part, but I think the immensity of it confuses people,
Yeah,
especially when they're talking about across cultural lines, right?
yeah,
And language and literally literal geography, which is frankly different to them than it is to us,
Yeah.
right? So,
Well, and
um,
people have been so prepared to say that they were disconnected, disparate, unknowing of each other's cultures and religions that it creates a cognizant dissonance. And
right.
then you say, okay, well, if that is so, now this is so big. How
Overwhelming. Right.
overwhelming, how can that be? And do I even really want to continue down that path?
It's one of those ones when you see people put their fingers in their ears and just go, la, 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 right?
Exactly.
Yeah. And so with that, moving down,
Yep.
right, from demigod,
Yeah.
now from there, we have an entity or just another progression in Eliud, the word
Yeah.
Eliud.
Yeah.
And what are they? Because this has taken on a life of its own, frankly, the term Eliud. And I don't know if you've heard the stories from the internet. Like
Yeah.
a lot of people have claimed that Bigfoot has talked to them
Yeah.
and claimed to be an Eliud
Yeah.
in search of redemption, that type of thing.
Yeah.
Right. So I just wanted to
Well,
maybe
Eliud is not a common term. It's used
no.
in basically two sources, as I recall, the Book of Jubilees, and
Mhm.
in one version of Enoch that I think is the Aramaic version, if I remember that sort of correctly. And it is sometimes understood as offspring of giants or a lower form of giant. And you get they're even though they're similar, they're not always necessarily understood as that. So I think we have to understand that giants, particularly after the flood, not necessarily before the flood, they didn't need to reproduce with humans or anybody else, the giants.
Right.
They could produce in great numbers
On their own.
on their own. After
Yes.
the flood, something changes. And we were talking, before the show about Ezekiel 32 and the terrible ones, which are the mighty ones in the sides of the pit prison. And in that word arit and aritim, as you would take that to the plural for terrible ones in plural versus terrible one. In the definition, it's got all these definitions that would apply to tyrants and dictators and giants and things like that, and mighty ones, but they have a fertility issue.
Yes.
And then that fertility issue seems to be reflected in the inability to produce women. And so they become very highly prized. And so in the royale and polytheist culture, if you're starting a new dynasty, you're going to require a purebred or as pure blood as you can get female to start that new dynasty and to carry the genes through from the celestial mafia parents, right?
Yeah.
So
Right. Right.
the godfathers and
Yes.
godmothers. So, and this becomes an issue where they have to start intermarrying with humans lest they go extinct. Now,
Right.
I don't know whether or not they're the same as the Nephilim, but they're kind of associated with the Eliud as well. But what we do know is um, Eliud is actually a Hebrew word. So there's some veracity to it from the understanding of ancient history. So it derives from El, an angel or a god, and from Howd or Ode, Eliud. So Howd is sort of the English translation, but not the full probably
Right.
pronunciation of it. It kind of twists through that H and the O and the U in there. So, and it literally means beauty, glorious, splendor, vigorous. And these were vigorous spirits as they were understood spiritually, and a majestic bloodline as well. So, this
Mm.
basically means the glory of the gods. Almost means like it's not a lower one, it's a direct offspring of the gods,
Right.
right? So
Yeah.
I understand how we get into the lower level giants. I mean, when giants started to giant patriarchs and matriarchs started to intermarry with females and males from humans, they created hybrids which were smaller giants, but they tended to look like them. right?
Right, right,
And there
right.
would and the Egyptian ancient texts described them as the Shazu, and they were 7 to 9 feet tall, so smaller giants, but giants nonetheless compared to the people at the time. But now when we get into Eliud as it's kind of morphed into our mythos, it's talking about creatures as you're talking about, more related to things like Bigfoot.
Yeah, or even just the offspring of the Nephilim, in essence, I think
Yes.
is what it's kind of taken on, is that kind of
Oh, but
even like a chink down from that, right?
yeah,
You know?
and then again, I would move that into the hybrids, right?
Yeah.
So, like, if you have, what do I mean by that is, so biblically we have um, in Genesis 36, which is an addition to the Table of Nations in Genesis 10, so we can better understand what's going on in the early post-Diluvian world. You have Eliphaz, son of Esau, brother of Jacob, so of the Abraham line, intermarrying with Timnah, a female Horim giant.
Mhm.
And they name the son Amalek, who produces offspring through that intermarriage as hybrids, human and giant, as the Amalekites, but distinct from the Amalekim, which predate them and are in Genesis 14 in the War of Giants. And they're going to go move to Petra and live amongst the Amalekite giant or Amalekim giants, and are going to create this interbred race. And so Amalek is, is received eponymously as the patriarchal name for a new eponymous tribe. So you have two different tribes, but they kind of look the same. They're kind of like
Right, yeah.
similar in looks, right? Just different in size. So biblically, we have that with that new dynasty that's starting out. That's going to be the same tribe that wants to wipe Israel from the face of the earth to inherit the Messianic blessing, the
Yes, right.
birthright, and and the overall blessing. And so it's important to understand that we have a bit of an understanding of these types of creatures in the Bible that the occult celebrates in
Yes.
in their sort of religions. So we can make that as a distinction, but not with the animal features.
Mm,
So now
gotcha.
if you get into like Bigfoot, like where would he come from?
Right.
Right. And so, in the Gnostic gospel Pistis Sophia, I think in chapter 126, as I recall, you're going to have these 12 rulers in this dungeon,
Oh,
and they're all named, and you have ones that have faces of serpents or dragons, which we would know as a seraphim. We have ones that have faces of lions, which we would know would be part of the cherubim. But you also, as you get into it, you have one that has the face of um, has a face of an ape. Well, now all of a sudden,
shocker.
that one's in the pit prison for the same crimes as the ones who created giants, and that would have a close affiliation, with the with the Bigfoot or Sasquatch or Yeti. And then in the offspring of Ialdabaoth, who has in the marriage, he has 7 offspring in Gnosticism. And what's interesting on that one is Adonan has a face of an ape.
Mm,
Now we don't, and biblically, we don't have all of the descriptions of
right.
of all of the angels. We know what a cherubim looks like. We know 3 of the faces of the Ophanim. We know what an archangel looks like. We know what a seraphim with the serpent face looks like. We think we know what the 3 types of angels at the bottom of the hierarchy look like. But when we get into, like exousia or dunamis or Icarus, those biblical names in Greek for other ones that we would know as powers and principalities,
Principalities, right.
and that would be arche. We don't get descriptions for what they look like. But
Yeah.
all of a sudden we have one that has Eleos, which has a face of a donkey um, or
Right, right.
and again, I'm not saying that they produce, but you also have one that's interesting called Astapheos, which has the face of a hyena, and this could be like a howling god known biblically. Well, the howling god is like Anubis.
Yes.
and
Like
depicted with a hyena's or a dog's face.
jackal or whatever, right, yeah.
Yeah, and in Egyptian and Greek mythology and history, he produced prolifically, so much so he had to create a city called Sinoopolis, which means
Yeah.
dog city in Greek, for his
Literally, Dog
offspring.
City,
Yeah,
right.
and so people will say, "Okay, but you can't get there biblically." Well, maybe we
I
can.
mean,
So
there's even a Christian saint that's said to be a,
Saint Christopher,
yeah.
yeah,
So,
and
yeah.
depicted in the Greek Orthodox as a dog Nephilim.
Yes. So,
So in in the Bible, in the book of Kings, you have um, the Avim giants listed in the Bible who are worshiping two gods. One is Nergal, which is a lion faced god and depicted with a lion's head and a human's body. And the other one is named Nebaz.
I've heard that.
Yes, and Nebaz, as you take that back to the Hebrew, means a barking god and was depicted with a dog's head.
Yes.
So
My gosh.
and then if you look at what are the other faces of a cherubim, you have like a black-haired human with a black beard, kind of like what some of the Anunnaki look like, right?
Right, and or yeah, other giants too,
Yep,
right?
yep. Well, and giants with dark hair would probably come from the cherubim line of that branch, and because the seraphim offspring typically had blonde hair and red hair. So both pale skin, but different types of hair and a little some different sort of looks to it. Now, if a cherubim took a um, face of the eagle, it would produce offspring that looked like that as well. Just as if you took the face of a lion, it would look like that. And those are two
Yeah.
other faces. So we get the linemen of Moab, the
Yes.
lion-like men of Gad, Arioch, one of the kings of the four giant races coming out of Mesopotamia, which means lion-like, and Aria is the root for Ariel, which means lion-like, and that means lion of God, and Aria goes back to Indo-Aryans. Like,
Right. Yes.
right? So, I mean, you have all of these sort of direct connections with the languages and things. Now, there's an interesting watcher group in Southeast Asia that includes, yes, the dragon creator gods, but other ones produced dog Nephilim as well. And other ones produced what they called the Tengu. And these were Tengu watchers generically, but specifically Tengu as the offspring are a bird faced giant.
Aren't they like cranes almost?
Well,
Well,
no.
some are
Yeah.
depicted that way, so
Yeah.
yeah. The
I'd say more
Tengu.
with the raven look, sometimes owl
Okay,
look.
gotcha. Yeah.
Um, so and they produced giants and that were controlling the religions for the priest line and also the warriors that introduced martial arts. And it's all throughout Southeast Asia. Now look at one of those depictions in Sumeria that has the Anunnaki watchers doing this ritual around this technology of some sort that has a black beard, black hair, and wings. And then you see the identical one with an eagle's face. That would be cherubim in the eagle head. Now
Yeah.
move over to the Popol Vuh. You have two groups of demigods of the Xibalba, which had owl face, so a Tengu
Mm.
one. And within the Xibalba, Xibalba, you have the Camazots, House of Camazots, which means in their language, House of the Bat. So
Mhm.
you have a Batman group. And if you Google Camazot, Camzotz, you're going to bring up Batman's outfit.
Yes. I
And
love it.
yeah, and of course, Robin was his counterpart, so probably a cherubim offspring.
Right. Oh
So,
my gosh. Wow. Um,
and again, you just can't explain this
no,
worldwide
you can't. You can't.
consistency. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's the
Yeah.
pattern I was trying to lay down.
Right. Absolutely. And it just, yeah, it's just there. I mean, it is. Um, Something I want to shift gears just a touch. And where does like Atlantis fit into your model? Like all this type of stuff.
Yeah, and I
And
think
I
that
say your model, but
yeah,
you know what I mean. Yeah.
yeah. So Atlantis fits into me in my model as an antediluvian society, one of several. And I would say Atlantis fits into the polytheist model as that as well, but as also has a conflation of perhaps a term that they use as Lemuria, which might have been a first civilization even further in the past that Atlantis would be an extension out of. And how I get there with the Atlantean story is it's too identical to all the flood stories around the world.
Right. It really is. I mean,
Yeah. And so, you have Poseidon, who is actually an offspring god. So it's told through the glory of the reigning of the gods after the flood. Because if you look at who the parent god would have been at that time, would have been Iapetus,
yes.
who produced Magog, Gog, and Albion as giants. But it's told through the Poseidon lens. But Zeus inherits all of the mythos of Kronos. El mythos is inherited by Baal. They're all seen through the chief god who takes over,
Yeah.
right? It's that mythos that's passed on. So in the Atlantean story that comes down through Plato and Critias and Timaeus, you have a historical linkage that goes back to Solon, who goes to Egypt to take the story down from the Egyptian priests that's written on the columns. So this has a very old history to it that goes back to a recollection understood by the ancients as being just commonly understood,
Yeah.
not allegorized to fit a politically correct world. It just was, and they were still being ruled by these gods for the most part. And monotheism was just this small little blink that comes up with Abraham after the Babel dispersion. Like it's gone all polytheistic. So Poseidon marries Cleito to produce 10 demigod kings that rule over the 10 empires of Atlantis. And so this is the same story as Genesis 6, where the sons of God go to the
Yep.
daughters of
It's
men to produce the giants, right? And they rule the world. And they're the cause of the flood. And in the Atlantean story, they go from, righteousness to evil and full of war. And they're trying to create an Atlantean empire. And Atlantis is trying to take over the whole world. And it's these wars that, in combination with their evil, and of course, the humans being too plentiful and noisy, that the gods take credit for bringing the flood. Now, take note of that, because if you're a monotheist, you get hammered all the time about how evil the God of the Bible is for bringing the flood. But
right.
in all the polytheist stories, they take credit for bringing the flood.
Right.
So
Exactly.
don't let them get away with that. So,
I
but
love
they
it.
know we don't know these things because they do research on us. We don't do research on them. So again, they have an advantage to deceive you with that. And so but in the Atlantean story, it's not just a flood. You've got the 3 stars of the Pleiades coming
Yeah.
in, and
Right.
again, that's common in polytheism around, and you have earthquakes, and you have volcanoes, and you have all sorts of other things, but we also get what I call out of place verses in the Bible. It's kinda similar to an oopart, an out of place artifact that nobody wants to recognize.
Right. Absolutely.
And, we have these passages, whether or not it's in the book of Psalms or it's in Amos or it's in Job, with things that we can't explain with some kind of destruction. That would be what could make the bottoms of the ocean bare,
Right.
and these powerful earthquakes, and God sending lightning and to overthrow the mighty and stuff like
Yeah.
that. Like there's a whole bunch of other passages that I would go with the Enochian version of a conflagration of events that would be perfectly in line to what we see happening. And now, if you're just looking for a flood, why can't we find just a flood? Because there's more catastrophes associated with it, and you have to have a more suited approach to look for all of those commonalities for the same sort of timeline. And then all of a sudden now meshes with a polytheist version. So we can take the same event, look at the stingy details we do get that are in the Bible and say, yeah, that makes sense. We don't have to argue on that. We agree there's a flood. We agree we have some details that are likely associated with the flood that would describe those events. And we have giants being created by gods, fallen
Yes.
angels that are the cause of the flood. And these were demigods as they were understood. And understand that demigod in the understanding of the old languages and meaning means offspring of the gods, of a human and a god.
Yeah.
And so it also goes back into Indo-Aryan with that same sort of meaning as well.
So essentially, it's just another telling of the pre-flood,
Yeah.
the antediluvian story.
Yes, and telling of the
And a
yeah.
lot of it rhymes. A
Yeah,
lot of it rhymes.
and a
So
lot of it rhymes. And
yes.
there's just the constant of the 10 kings and
Yeah.
10 is an
Yeah.
antediluvian constant around the world.
Yeah.
So when you have
So
the same story talked about through just a local vernacular lens
yeah.
and a polytheist lens versus a monotheist lens, but the direction of the story is identical.
Yes.
You
It's almost like it's like a regional variant, sort of,
yeah,
to an extent,
yeah,
Okay, good. That's what I thought. But, um, so how do you think, and I know you've talked about this ad nauseum, but how do you think the giants show up after the flood? I mean,
yeah,
if the flood wiped out the pre-flood world,
yeah.
right? Then how, what's your theory on how they that the Nephilim, or whatever we want to call them, the bloodlines, how did that
Yeah.
um you know what I'm saying? How did the high jump over the flood?
Yeah, and my preferred position on this, but I'm not locked in 100%, but I go like
Yeah,
98 to 99%,
right.
is second incursion. It just fits the details of the Bible better. And so when we look at passages in the New Testament that are describing what happened in the days of Noah, so you go to Jude 1:6, and you have the angels who left heaven and in the time of the flood, right?
Yes.
And then it equates that with Sodom and Gomorrah, and Sodom and Gomorrah having the same crimes for what these ones who were sent to prison uh, did. You have an understanding that if they were sent to the pit prison, at least in part for, as a minimum, for creating the giants, creating gods in the physical world, which weren't permitted. Um, then, if it's the same crime, then they did the same thing. And so then it enters into this wording of, you know, strange flesh that they were having, wanting to have sex with. Well, that
Yeah.
strange, sex is understood with part of the meaning that goes with Sodom and Gomorrah and what Sodom is rooted in terms of its name, but it could mean other sexual violations as well. In other words, it could mean because it's associated with strange flesh, as you take it into the Greek, it means a different species, a different kind. This is not necessarily a natural human um,
Yeah.
sex as we would understand it from a monotheist lens, which was also associated with Sodom and Gomorrah and the cities of the plain. But it also links in with 2 Peter 2's description and 1 Peter 3 when Jesus is in the grave talking to these evil spirits all doing these same crimes and this filthy conversation as 2 Peter 2 talks about, which goes about this conversation Jude 1:6 with strange flesh, which is referring to the 2 angels that go to Sodom in human form, and we don't know whether or not they're wanting them to have sex with the males or with the females to produce more giants.
Right.
And but they're seemingly familiar with this idea that angels can have sex,
Yeah. Well, like
whichever
they knew
way.
it.
Yeah,
Yeah. Right.
and that's because they would have been ruled over by giants at that time, and that they had this fertility issue that we talked about and may wanted more. They also knew that angels could take a sex of their choice. So they could have been wanting to maybe provide the daughters or having them turn into females. so that they could have sex with them, just as Gilgamesh is the offspring of a female goddess and a human male. So they understand all of these different things and that these demigods are becoming fewer in number. Now, what's interesting is that in the Gnostic version is giants were created before the flood at Gomorrah, where they planted the seed first, and
Okay.
then Sodom after the flood. So now all of a sudden we
Mm,
have a bit of a polytheist lens and a second incursion.
yeah.
And now if we look at the Epic of Gilgamesh that we've talked about, Gilgamesh was born 6 generations after the flood and is probably named after the giant, which is common for post-Diluvian giants to be named after Anti-Deluvian giants or before the flood. So in the Enoch Book of Giants, there's Gilgamesh, but he
Yes.
was killed in the flood, and this one is born 6 generations afterwards.
After. Right.
You have, okay, this must be a second incursion. So not only does the Epic of Gilgamesh give a survival story of giants, because they're all demigods, 2/3 God, 1/3 human, and created
Right.
like Gilgamesh on the Ark story there. It's a giant survival story, but you have a second incursion. But now you have 2 options available to you in that one.
Right. So this is why you
Yeah,
could it's not 100% because
yeah,
I mean,
I leave that crack
I've always
open.
thought like where could something have hidden or
Yeah,
survived this flood, right?
yeah,
Like I
and that's where I'm going. So just one more
yeah,
account in Polytheism for Second Incursion. Hesiod talks about the first race of giants killed in the wars, and then the second race, Second Incursion, and Deucalion and Pyrrha are what is understood with through disinformation and misinformation to be the Greek Noah. And Deucalion is the offspring of Prometheus. He's a giant.
right,
The
right.
giant survival story, like um, Utnapishtim in the uh, or Zayazudra, depending on which version of the Sumerian one that you're talking about. So I leave a crack open for survival somehow, some way. But
Yeah.
the record fits second incursion better with the additional details we get. So
Yeah.
I'm saying we know this for sure, but maybe some did survive.
Yeah, it could
And
be a combination of both. I
yeah,
mean,
so
yeah.
biblically in Genesis 6 and 7, we get that small crack where you could walk through legally.
Mm,
And what I'm saying there is that God is going to bring the flood and destroy everything he created on the earth. But he did not
gotcha.
create he did not create the giants, the fallen angels did.
The fallen angels did, right.
And God is Alpha and Omega, and he knows from the beginning that the angelic rebellion is going to happen, how many times it flares up,
Yeah.
how many different crimes are going to
It's
do.
gonna get there somehow.
Yeah, he's going to let it go through free choice, and he's greater than free choice. So he knows they're going to do this if they survive, just as he knew they were going to create the demigods. So they could take them off the earth somehow, some way. So you get an account of Amakaseth, which is another type of giant character in Gnosticism, who is saved from the coming flood in a cloud. So just as you have
Yeah.
centaurs in Greek mythology created in a cloud, with
Yes.
Hera, something different, maybe some DNA manipulation going on there, but off the earth in a spaceship,
Somewhere, who knows,
some
on
sort of
another planet,
environment,
it could
however,
be anywhere,
yeah, in
right.
another dimension. In
Yeah.
the earth, they could help them. In Hades or Sheol, they could create something that would protect them within that sort of dimension to have them return. So
Yeah.
somehow, some way, by the fallen angels, or as with the ark stories, maybe some giants survived with the arks that were built by the gods, which is a different detail biblically in those stories. And as what we saw in the last Noah movie, Noah built the ark, not the gods or the angels.
Right.
That's a polytheist influence on the story.
Yes. Right. Oh my
Um,
gosh.
yeah.
Yes.
So somehow on an ark is also a possibility for some of them. And then my least favorite one is somehow on the ark with in and through DNA somehow, right?
With the
Yeah.
Ham's yeah.
Yeah, because
Yeah.
polytheism will say that the wives had the genes of the giants, but you also have to account for the 4 races that show up. So that gets
Right.
very complicated with different kinds of people and different kinds of human races that have
And
that.
ancient CRISPR technology,
Yeah.
Gary. That's what we're talking about.
So, and some people
Yes.
say some of them were giants on the ark. Uh,
Gotcha.
like Ham was a giant, or all the sons were giants, or everybody was a giant, depending
Right.
on which polytheist Gnostic story that you're going with. But again, that seems to me is doesn't account for other details that all show up, and it starts to create shockwaves downstream. Just as survival has some shockwaves downstream with some details that we can't reconcile if they only show up through survival. So when I look at second incursion, it doesn't have any shock waves, but you
Yeah.
can have a possibility that some may have survived somehow, some way. And that's
Yeah.
why I leave that sort of crack open. But second incursion allows for what's going on in what we described in Genesis 36.
Yeah.
For
So
the
so with that, we hear this, right? Or we see the possibility of the second incursion, like
Yep,
kind of like the aftermath.
yep.
But do we hear about that? Is that written about anywhere?
No, we don't have a verse where it says after the flood specifically
Yeah. I mean, even in
that
like
they
what about
created the giants.
text?
What Well, in Genesis 6, 1 through 4, the language is interesting. So when you have the sons of God that went to the daughters of men and did so again.
I did so again. Yes. Okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
Now and when you take that back to the Hebrew, doing so again and afterwards as well in combination with there, that means
Right.
in like manner and several times.
Yeah.
So
Because you had
now,
the giants before the flood and
yeah.
after.
So
Yeah.
maybe different watchers, the offspring gods in this case, and I'll get there in a second. But when you look at in like manner, that means God's creating demigods in the same way they did before. So that could mean several times after the original 200 before the flood, or it
Yeah.
could mean after the flood, or it could mean both. And I think it sort of leans towards both. But again, my stickler is as a contrarian, I don't have that specific verse
Right.
after the flood, which is where I would look for it, or would want to have it be. But I can use that in sort of saying I think it supports a second incursion.
Yeah. There's an
S-
inference
Yeah,
there.
so in the Ugaritic text, which is a great source because it's in the original Semitic, and original Hebrew was almost identical to the Semitic. It's actually a branch language of Semitic languages.
Mhm.
So you get words that are the same. So you could have a word in there like Rephaim, which would be in the original Semitic RPM for the RAPU. And the original Hebrew would be the same RPM. And then when vowels came in, it would be, Rapayam. And then with the evolution of the language, you get the H. So the original Semitic for Nephilim was also NPL for Nephilim or Nephil,
Mm.
and H and the vowels in the same sort of evolution, just to give two sort of quick examples. Or Gibborim shows up as in Gabor in the Ugaritic text is GBR in the original, or Gabor for mighty or mighty ones. There's actually a tribe of mighty Gabor in the Ugaritic text.
Yeah.
And in the
Right.
Ugaritic text, the Rephaim, and also understand in the occult that Baal had many names. He had like Hadad, Adad, and also a name very similar to Raphael, but a little bit distinct, a few different variations of the spelling. And it was common for gods to have 7 names in prehistory, which makes it really confusing, right?
Right. But actually, that does make sense in theory.
Yes.
The 7, right?
Yeah, it's consistent at least, right?
Yes.
So
Correct.
they maybe have some sort of transliteration crossovers. So the Baalim Council of Baal at the head as an offspring god with an At and a Mur and all these other ones that are listed in the Ugaritic text produce giants. And the main one is with a patriarch named Rapha, uh, named after one of the names of Baal, for the Raphaim giants that show up in Genesis 14 and 15, and the word for
Right.
giant that's used after the flood for the most part, versus Nephilim.
Right.
So,
As Raphael.
yes. And so that starts to make sense that he and the Baalim Council created Raphaim giants. And what's also interesting is Amur or Amaru also created two giants, and one of them named Amur, and it was classified as a servant because he's an offspring of the god, right?
Yeah.
And again, if that sounds similar to what is used in Jesus, that's how they considered the giants as a demigod, Christ-like figure line, as a priest king originally, and they counterfeit everything.
Yeah. Because I've heard stories about like people hearkening back to like Herculean comparison with Jesus.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And that's how they get there because it's the polytheist lens of the one coming to save us in the end
Yes.
time, who's going to
Yes.
be Lord Maitreya, which is a transliteration of Mitra out of the Zoroastrian language, or the new Buddha, or whatever they want to call him, who's going to have a
Right.
pedigree and is going to be a Messianic or Christ-like figure. So, but we understand them from the monotheist lens as Antichrist, dragon messiahs. So,
Gotcha.
so anyways, Amor is the sort of, as you take that back again to the original Semitic, is going to be the root word for Amorite.
Hmm.
And so the patriarch for the Amorites, which do not have a patriarch, and there's 9
Right.
tribes who do not, would go back to Amor as through Amori. And again, the E would have been added as the A was added, so it would be more like Marie, right? And now you have the same word.
Yeah.
And
I was just thinking of you with the Mlord, the name. Why? Oh, because I was just at the zoo and we have Amur tigers,
yeah,
right? Or Amur leopards that even though people would know them as Siberian tigers, but
yeah,
I think the old name is Amur.
yeah.
Which is just kind of funny that you said that.
Yeah, I know. So
As a region, right?
and
So,
again, everything that comes down through history is named after gods and the religion to honor the pantheon of the gods. So we need to
right.
understand that legacy that's written into the our history with the words. So,
Absolutely.
and so now all of a sudden you have all of these patriarchless tribes that are not full giants because the Amorites were thought of by the Egyptians as the Shazu. They lived amongst the Anakim.
Yeah.
And
The
now things start
Anakim.
to, yeah. And the
Yeah.
Anakim from Arba does not have a patriarch in the Table of Nations. Why? Because he's a giant. There's no giant
Right.
patriarchs there, which is why the Amorites, the Jebusites, the Arvadites, and the whole all 9, just to go through, they do not have patriarchs. And Rapha is not in there as well. So again, we have a pattern, but yet when we get races that are created in Genesis 36, we get the patriarchs. But it's not part of the table of nations of the 70 nations. It's an addition to understand where these tribes come from. So also what's interesting is in Genesis 15, you have the the Cadmonites, the Kenizzites, and the Kenites, which are part of the 10 nations that are being gifted to Abraham, in addition to the mighty 7. So there's the triple K in addition, so the mighty 10. Well, these are listed in the Ugaritic text. So like the Cadmoni in the singular would be QDM. And in the Ugaritic text, which are giants of
Wow.
the East.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah, and all of them are understood and used as words as QDM, Q. I'm trying to think of the other ones for the Kenites. What it would have been in the original Hebrew, but Um, QNAZ or QNZ is another format, but we get all of those listed for those 3 triple K, all meaning ancient of the East as giants. And another tribe
Wow.
that is that maybe using it more generically, or it's another tribe, is Elam. And historically, Elam is made up of 2 peoples. And
Hmm.
one would be, as we know biblically, as part of the descendants of Shem, but
Right.
also secularly known from people who come down from the mountains. And these are the giants as Elam. But they took on the name Elam. So I think the patriarch's name was changed to the giant name. And Elam means ancient, the ancient ones.
Man.
So that means, again, hints at almost a survival of some giants that come down
Yeah,
from the
right.
mountains and intermarried again with humans after the flood, and I call them the Olamim.
Yeah. Man. I so how do we move from there into like the more modern, like
Yeah.
does it morph into the well, we started this episode with um the idea that they control everything on this world
Yes.
at as it is,
Yes.
right? And through the bloodlines.
Yes.
Now, how do we get into those bloodlines, and how did those bloodlines trace this back? You know what I mean? Or is it fabricated, or is there some sort of like they're like, oh, I choose that one. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Yeah.
Or is there more of an actual bloodline? I
Yeah.
mean, bloodlines are so, we talk about purity, right? Which
Yep.
is kind of a misnomer.
Yes.
Because there's no such thing as like 3/4 of the world is, related to Charlemagne in some form or
Yeah.
fashion, right? But with
So
that being
it's
said,
degrees of purity.
right,
Yeah.
correct. And how straight can we get,
Yeah.
what was,
So, yeah, just as a, laying down sort of a preface is from the outside looking in, we have to be open to both possibilities or 3 possibilities. One is that there is a direct lineage. 2 is, there is, um, some additions over time that aren't necessarily true. It's mixed with truth. And 3, it was all made up at some point in time just for the rich to control the earth. Um, the trouble though is the top 2 classes have to work together around the world, even though they can be at sort of rivals, right?
yeah.
So they have to have a way of understanding who you are and where you
Mhm.
fit, because there's a hierarchy in that's related to the
Right.
gods that you go back to and how pure your DNA and your bloodlines are. And it's a combination of all of that, and then how powerful through the money and power that you have. There's always that sort of balance, and there's always sort of what they would call um, barbarians or strongmen that come in for short periods of time and pollute the whole thing until they get them removed. So what they did was they created their genealogies that they say they keep back into the mists of time. They could be fabricated, we don't know.
Yeah.
But they do value a specific gens and the specific blood types. They
Okay.
and it's the blood types that people are most familiar with in terms of the Rh negative. And people say, well, if giants were come along after humans, then you can't add something that wasn't there before. In other words, Rh negative is missing the D antigen. And so you can't add something that wasn't there. Well, that's fine if it was that's how you attract things. You track that from a physical, visible aspect, but it's the gene that produces the blood type. So you have to track the genes. So they track genes as well as the blood type. And so the blood type is a manifestation of the genes passed on through the female who it has the unique ability to pass on that gene and Rh negative bloodline, and why we have Rh negative jumping some generations at time in terms of how the genes work there.
Right.
So you have a gene that I talk about in book one called the LB gens, which is a Latin word understood as albi as in pale white or hoary or frost white or like ghostly white, and gens, which is a specific patriarch that this
Hmm.
tribe or bloodline goes back to. So an albi gens is one of those genses that they track. What would be some other genses without getting too involved? You have like the Julia gens of the black nobility that goes back to like Caesar and Augustus. That's part of the bloodlines that come out of the 100 senator families. Fabia would be another one. There's a few other, I won't go into all of them. But those 100 families of senators go back to Romulus and Remus, who are the offspring of Ares, and from the Greek understanding of that, and
Right.
Mars, the war god, in the Latin pantheon. So they track those genealogies. You have another one, just so that people understand it, because we kind of talked about this through the Greeks. And with Zeus, he produced through Alcmene Hercules. Okay. Hercules produced bloodline of kings that was known in the ancient world as the Herculides bloodline.
Hmm.
And these became known as the giant kings that were known as tyrants, tyrannos, one of the descriptions for Nephilim. No coincidence there, because that's what they were. They're
Right.
just as bull was understood as an angel and their offspring in the Ugaritic text and in the
Yes.
Sumerian text. So when it says Nephilim is a bully, understand that's a term for the giants again. It's not meaning something different. It's to give you the full understanding. And woodcutters, same thing. I can take that back biblically if people want it. And I put it in book two. Understand it's associated with the giants when it's used in those applications. So when we look at the Greek one, he produced these Herculides bloodlines that goes back to Zeus that they call the Cretagens. KRT in the Ugaritic text for
Yeah.
Crete, because he spent a lot of time on Crete, and that's the Cretagens.
Right. Right.
And now,
Okay.
now that's linked some of this. So the Albigens is kind of linked more heavily through the Odin bloodline, through the to the Anu bloodline of the fairy gens of the Plantagenista of from Anu, through the Anjou. Okay, so there's a combination of intermarriage of that coming downstream, but you're going to have two of those bloodlines, maybe three, going through King Charles's bloodline. But
Well,
he's
because
more,
that's the Plantagenets, right?
yeah,
Which kicked through and then go up into Normandy and then up
yes,
into England. So
yes,
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 got you.
yes, and that's a junior offshoot of the Anjou, as we would understand it with the royals,
Right.
an offshoot, junior offshoot um,
Yeah. Some would say
of the De
rogue.
Vere and the
Some would
Angevin.
say rogue
Yeah,
offshoot.
and then back through the Picts of Scotland, and then back to the Tuatha Danu, back into Sumeria as they take that sort of history back. So the
Yes.
Albigens is kind of the main one for the kings. That's the one they tend to seem to
Okay.
focus on. And so King Charles, he's on record when he was prince saying that I can, my genealogies go back to Vlad the Impaler.
Yes.
And that comes through the Hanovering bloodline, because the Hanovers produced the Windsor bloodline, and they changed their name in World War I
Yeah,
for obvious reasons.
they're all German. They
And they're all
just,
German, and through intermarriage through Central Europa.
yes.
And what's interesting about Vlad the Impaler is he's the one that Dracula meaning a dragon, and in Greek, a dragon is Dracont, and Draconta for a watcher
Yes.
angel.
Right.
And A means son of a dragon for Dracula, for the allegory for Bram Stoker's Dracula, that um, Vlad the Impaler was used to base it on. And he was this noble Celt in his description: pale skin, red hair, hazel eyes, whole bunch of other things. But his bloodlines go back to the Egrethy Scythian tribe produced by Hercules. So you have what
Yes.
you call this ennobling of bloodlines through more other pure bloodlines. And that is the scioning or grafting in effect. So, how does that go back in terms of how they track that? They had to come up with taciturn language to communicate that because
Mhm.
if you are traveling from different realms, you've got different languages, and depending on how far you travel. So, they designed something called standards in ancient times where they would use imagery that would track them back to specific watchers. And so you're going to see in the
Perfect.
yeah, you're going to see like a dragon on some of those coats of arms as we know them of today, which is a seraphim angel. You're going to see
Yeah.
an eagle, cherubim. You're going to see a lion, cherubim. You're going to see a bull, cherubim. It
What about
just
unicorns?
unicorn is another allegory for a cherubim.
Okay.
But there's something unique with the special knowledge that is associated with that unicorn and the third eye. So there's something special about that. So unicorn in the occult can mean the horse, chimera horse that was created for the giants to ride on, but also an angelic being.
Hmm.
And so when you go back into Greek history, which is the best example to show how this connects together, you have in the Greek history the chariots of the gods that the ancient alien mythos likes to use, right?
Yeah,
And
of course.
the more latter ones just shows horses pulling the chariot, but the older ones had horses with horns.
Okay.
Now, as you link that back to that as being a counterfeit, they would have their own thrones as God
Hmm.
has a throne of God. Now,
Yes.
Ezekiel 1, 3, and 10 has visions of God's throne being pulled by cherubim. And angels within the wheels
Hmm.
have are slightly different because they have one face of a cherubim and then three faces that match the cherubim. And that word there is Ophan versus Gigal
Yeah.
for wheel. So where it's referring to the angels, Ophan for the Ophanim watchers, which are shown in the book of Enoch. These are the throne angels. So that's how they get there. And this horn is also understood as the third eye, where this special knowledge comes through.
Makes complete sense.
Now, what's really interesting is you look at that unicorn, you have that as a single horn. And it's also an allegory that's used in the Bible for Antichrist.
Yeah, because I've also listen to me. I've also seen a few of the unicorn, like in a heraldic
Yeah.
thing, where they're chained, but
Yeah.
sometimes they're unchained.
Yeah.
So it's just makes me think.
Yeah. So, I mean, I'm not always convinced that that goes back in their meaning to being a fallen angel.
Hmm.
But chain is certainly a part of the heraldic meaning.
Yeah, and I
Um,
just wonder what, you know what I mean?
yeah.
Where that it's interesting. Is what, yeah,
Well,
definitely interesting.
you know, if you did link it back with, us looking from the outside in and trying to sort of understand it, if there was a special meaning there, is that they could be referring to angels that are in the pit prison versus ones that are not. But then if
Right,
all of
right.
them were put in there for having sexual activity with humans, then all of them would be associated with the chain. So there's something different there.
Yeah, there is something different there. Okay, so now kind of transitioning to a more like kind of what is going on now. We see and we hear Jesus said in the last days, it would be as in the days of Noah,
Yeah.
that the last days would be as the days of Noah.
Yeah.
What what does that mean to you? Like
Yeah.
where are we headed?
Yeah.
Because some people would be like, "Oh, we're there," but others,
Yeah.
it's one of those things.
I know.
What are you feeling?
I was absolutely shocked once I got out into social media to see how people would use what Jesus was saying about it was going to be like the days of Noah to limit what that means. And it was only
Yeah,
ungodliness and general violence that we would see to this day. So I was so concerned that that propaganda was so strong out there. I led book 2 with that as an opening chapter.
Right.
And so the first thing to remember with the days of Noah in Luke's account, he also connects the days of Lot to the days of Noah with the same crimes again and a destruction by fire, which is reserved for the end time. And so it's a transition. So it's when you look at prophetic allegory that's used for destruction in the end time, it's going to come on us like a flood, and it's going to be used with Sodom and Gomorrah fire destruction allegories. It's going to be like Sodom and Gomorrah in the end time. So we want to understand that in that sort of context, but we need to understand what Jesus was actually quoting when he said that. He was quoting Genesis chapter 9, verse 28 to 29 for the days of Noah, which was 600 years before the flood and 350 years after the flood. So we should be looking both sides, which is what he was telling us to do, because giants walked amongst us before the flood and after the flood.
And
The
after.
gods did before and after the flood. And the days are going to be exactly like that. And so when we look at New Testament accounts to define what he's talking about, whether or not you're talking about First Peter, whether or not you're talking about reference to destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah, whether or not you're talking about 2 Peter 2, whether or not you're talking about Jude 1:6, and other passages that I quote in that chapter, it's all giving you the context for typology. That's all based in the Old Testament that tells us the same story. We need to use all of that typology to understand what he's saying. But they don't want you to do that. So they have to say it's just, ungodliness and, normal wars and things getting worse as we go into that. So let's just examine that just a little bit further. So when we look at the violence before the flood, this is being caused by the giants, which is why they're the context for the flood story as the preamble for the flood story. And the violence is not at a level with knives and swords and axes as we're led to believe. It is understood, if we can use it or permitted to use it, the book of Enoch, which talks about all the arts and crafts of war were taught to the giants by the fallen angels, thus the violence. But this is angelic technology that had the ability to destroy the world by fire. And so if they had that kind of technology, we're just catching up to that now because we're not in the last 7 years yet. So it was more advanced than what we have today through the angelic technology, because it's like the days of Noah and nothing is new under the sun. Ecclesiastes 1, and as you read on, what was will be again, and the understanding of this only brings grief and sorrow. So as we understand that, if we look at what the polytheists have in their accounts through the secret societies and the Polychronicon and through Gnosticism, we have the pillars of Lamech being created to show the directions to this lost antediluvian knowledge that we see coming down in the Pearls of Wisdom, the Emerald Tablets, and 1,000 different other mythological stories of this great knowledge and understanding. Atlantis mythology in there as well, stored underneath the Great Pyramid. But they put the directions on this on 2 separate pillars. One is to survive a flood. One is the destruction by fire. So they don't know which one's coming. So they do both. Which is really kind of interesting, because it shows, A, they don't know anything, but now they have to have this knowledge that is going to be surviving into the post-Diluvian epoch to be found, which it is by Hermes, who delivers it to Nimrod. But now if we go into 2 Peter 3, where it's got the famous passage about a day is like 1,000 years, because in terms of they're saying, when is this coming? Well, it goes into this interesting thing about something in the beginning, that there was a destruction by fire that's reserved for the end time, and the planet that was in the water, out of the water, perished. While people say, well, that's the flood, but except that the whole earth didn't perish. It was just what was on the land, not in the sea. So perish is complete death. So the whole earth didn't die. So this might be referring to something before
Right.
and in the beginning that's reserved for the end times. So if God was wanting things to play out, flood becomes the option for the intercession versus destruction by fire, because that's where they're headed to, which reflects now how dangerous that knowledge is. And that antediluvian knowledge, according to the Gnostics and secret societies, say it had the ability to destroy the world by fire. So it's powerful. Right? They know
Yeah.
they had that knowledge, whether or not it, it was originally somewhere in some of the scriptures that we have, we don't know. And so I want to make sure we understand this is what they believe, right?
Right.
Versus what I can take back biblically. But it does explain a lot of things. And then the other thing in terms of the technology is we can't build cities like they did with that
Mm-mm.
type of masonry, with that type of sacred geometry, ratios of the earth, celestial alignments that they somehow had before the flood, which leads me into what we do have that we can lean on biblically in terms of the type of technology that they had, which was the whole earth was corrupted and all flesh was corrupted in Genesis 6 and 7. The
Mm-hmm.
Hebrew word corrupt is shakath, meaning to pervert, to decay, to ruin, to destroy. Words like that. So all flesh was
Yeah.
perverted.
And
All plant genome was polluted.
yeah, so like genetic corruption,
Genetic corruption. Yeah.
hybridization, things like
Chimera,
that, right?
an
Yeah.
antediluvian concept of mixing DNA of different types of animals together in different types of creatures for things like King Hababa of the cedar forest,
Right.
right?
Right. Yeah.
Okay, so they had, if they had the ability to manipulate DNA and somehow intermix it with and create all of these other kinds of creatures that we were talking about earlier, then what other technology did they have? If they had technology on building that we didn't have, and we're just catching up to the days of Noah, all of a sudden we should understand the days of Noah is that we should learn about everything we can about
Yeah.
what happened leading into the flood. And then, let's say, for the first 100 years or so after the flood and with the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah, because it's going to be like that.
Right. Hmm. Well,
And
it's
if,
like,
and if
go
people,
ahead.
I was just going to say, if people don't think there's some ancient technology out there, I mean, we have to, I mean, we can make a logical case. But we also have a little bit of evidence as to how secretive this stuff would be because of how
Yeah.
powerful it would be. And I'm going to just throw this one FOIA request out that is kind of like Pandora's box of how little we know, to use a polytheist term. So it's FOIA number F-2019-02110. And it came from Denetra de Senegar, who was in the Hillary Clinton office. And here's what she requested for Hillary Clinton. Requesting documents, and I'm quoting the FOIA, requesting documents pertaining to the resurrection chamber of Gilgamesh,
Mhm.
the location of his body, and the location of the buried Nephilim dated 12/13/2018. And this is where I printed it off the government site. And to get a clearer one, I put the links and all of it there. Secretary of State, almost president, husband was president, wants to know more about resurrection chambers. That's a
Mhm.
technology we don't have that was
Right.
used for Gilgamesh.
Right. Who, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, how do you explain that?
No, exactly. And
You
like,
don't.
why would anyone
Just
even
is.
think of that up? Right. Like,
Yeah,
it's not like just, that it was in some email to somebody. Like,
yeah,
come on.
yeah. Uh,
Yeah.
and again, I don't know. I cannot tell you what information they were provided because
Because
we don't get
yeah,
that unless you do your own FOIA request, which is very
right.
difficult, and
Yes.
and stuff like that. I doubt whether you or I would get that. Hillary Clinton would get that,
Right.
but we wouldn't
Um,
get that.
yeah, it's like the stuff all the stuff with transhumanism humanism. I mean, I I kinda see that as a modern version of Genesis 6 rebellion to an extent. I
Yeah,
mean, maybe not in a grand a scale, but,
yeah.
I mean, are we watching mankind attempt to become as gods
Yes,
again,
we
like
are.
through AI and genetic
Yes,
editing and cybernetics and
yeah,
biotechnology?
yeah, we are. I think we are. And the only thing that can be produced within our physical world are physical gods
Yeah,
that have to remain in this physical world. Um, so it's different than what God is promising, that we can go into heaven, which is a different dimension, or however other many other dimensions there might be. Um, so they have to provide an ability to create immortality within the physical world, and they have to provide unlimited knowledge. Those are the two pillars of polytheist godhood in the physical world. And so they're working on that. So with transhumanism, with clone bodies, with
yeah,
spare
yeah.
parts,
Which I mean, not even I just did some research the other day, and there has been human clones. Period.
yeah,
There, it's been done, and nobody really talks about it, but people have gone to jail for it already. So, I mean, come on.
yeah. So and
People are like, "Oh, that's not that doesn't."
yeah,
It does. It already has happened.
yeah.
So,
And they've got us brainwashed to believe that as humans, our spirits go somewhere and are alive somewhere, but the Bible doesn't tell us that. And people's
yeah,
head explode when I say this, but we're not disembodied spirits when we leave. We're not counterfeit spirits made by the fallen angels. I mean, Ecclesiastics 12 says that um, and it's talking about death and the silver cord and the attachment to our spirit. The whole thing is meaningful there. But when we die, our spirits go back to heaven, not our souls, not our bodies. That's of the physical world. But
yes,
our spirits come from heaven and they go back to heaven in a sleep like state because we're told probably 1,000 times, maybe more. I stopped counting. I just got bored with how many
it's
times I could find
yeah,
the word for death for sleep. It's just, I
right,
mean, you can't get it to be said more that we sleep, but in a spirit sleeps. But you'll get a concept from the physical world and the wisdom of the world of soul sleep. There's no such thing as soul sleep. There's only spirit sleep until you wait for your resurrection as a human spirit. And so these cloned bodies aren't for us. These
yeah,
oiketarians, a dwelling place for the spirit that they're trying to create, these sleeves, whatever you want to call them, they're for the demon spirits. They're not for us.
yeah.
And demon spirits of many varieties based on the different kinds of spurious offspring that they may have created.
Yeah, and see, that's something that people don't know about is like the offspring spirits, like beyond the
Yeah.
Nephilim,
Yeah.
right? And what does that mean?
Yeah.
Um, and
Well, it could mean,
they're building an army in essence. I
yeah.
mean, to
Yeah.
an extent.
And how many of these beings are going through portals from Shades and Shades, Hades and Sheol?
Sheol, yeah,
Yeah, certainly a lot of the elementals do.
yes,
And if people aren't familiar with the term elementals, that's at the bottom of the hierarchy of the visible ones.
Yes,
versus
yes.
what's in the middle and at the top, which would be the Nephilim demonic spirits at the top.
Yeah.
And so you've got elements that are four classifications, all associated with sort of elements of the world as we see them, especially in kung fu movies of martial arts from Tengu.
Yeah.
just saying, no, just a coincidence.
It's a
So,
coincidence.
yeah, yeah. So they link with fire, earth, wind, air, right, as those four
Right.
elementals, and they have a large reptilian being called a salamander, that's taller than a human, that associated with these reptilians in the ground, um, as one group, and then you have three groups of little ones, right? And they're all creations from the gods and throughout the world, and it's the same four groups all around the world. How can that be if it's not the
Right.
same original religion?
Like, seriously.
Yeah, seriously, the pattern
Uh,
says we have a common hidden history that they don't want us to know us about. So you have like the little good-looking people, right? And
right.
they've got like neroids and sprites and mermaids and sylphs. So these are the light elves and sylphs. There's different types of sylphs, so be careful with that one. Um, and even the First Nations all have the same groups. Like Dogwood
Mhm.
would be a
All of
good-looking
them.
one. Yeah, and then you have ugly ones like trolls and elves, dark elves versus white
Pukwudgies and
elves,
stuff
which are
like that,
giants,
right?
yeah, goblins and dwarves,
Yeah.
and then you have mischievous ones like leprechauns and pixies and brownies and menuhe and stuff like that. So you have these four different groups that are part of the hierarchy, and what's interesting is you want to link this in for some reality is the one group in the ugly group of the gnomes, there's one specific group that has UAPs, flying machines that come through fairy portals or domens, right? They kidnap people. They have to generate their physical DNA. So they do sexual experimentation. They're little ones and they're called the Greys. And
The Grays, right?
and what they do and what they look like are identical to the gray alien mythos. So an interdimensional being with advanced technology beyond what we have as part of the elementals. But people will say, you're talking just polytheism. So can we take that back to the Bible? Yes, we can. So if people aren't familiar with Galatians 4 and Colossians 2, I would really encourage people to read Galatians 4, 3, and 9, where it's talking about these elementals, Greek word stoichian there, that enslave us in this world, along with the fallen angels that are also talked about in there, the
Right.
principalities and groups of,
Powers,
yeah, powers that
all
are
the
there,
things.
right?
And see,
And
it's
then,
like such a loose term that,
yeah,
like, people hear principalities and powers and they're like, what does that even mean? Well,
these
this
are
is
the
what they're talking about.
Greek names
Right.
for angels, and you have to take it back to the Greek because the translators confuse dunamis
Yeah.
and exousia and other ones, and so they mistranslate it. And they also have different names. They might have a power as a ruler somewhere else, right?
Yeah.
So you just gotta do a little bit more research. And then in Colossians 2, which you should read that for understanding in combination with 1 Peter 3 when Jesus was in the grave, where he's going to make a spectacle. Link that up with Ephesians 4, 8 through 10 of the parading out of these spirits and the captivity of the captives, and understand that Paul there is quoting in both of those accounts Psalms 68 in whole, which is where Jesus is pulling out his enemies out of the prisons to Mount Hermon for final judgment for before returning them there. They have their sentence for going to the lake of fire that he's recorded in Matthew 25. And then he's going to resurrect on the Sunday after that. I mean, it's just absolutely important passages that we're not taught. And in
Right.
Colossians 2, 8 and 20, they're called rudiments, Greek word stoichian, associated with these same fallen angel groups, and is defined as an elemental being.
Hmm. Wild.
So
Love
again,
it.
we get these stingy details. If we want to pay attention to those details, we can understand how the world works.
Yeah.
But our churches do not teach this.
No, because I just think it's so confusing to people that don't want to dive in. I think it's that hurdle of that. I wrote a book called The War You Didn't Know You Were In.
Yeah.
And this literally, and I keep saying this to people, is the first hurdle to get over is that this world is not just where we are at. Like,
Yeah.
please, you have to hear this and understand that we're just here, but there's so much going on around us that we can't see or hear. Well, we can if we're open to it.
Yes.
And
But we have to be open to it, and it takes a lot of work, and
it
there's a lot
does.
of
It
things
does.
to connect, but the churches should be preparing us for the world we live in, not dumbing us down to be deceived in the world.
Well, and that's the ultimate battle that we talk about, right?
Yes.
Is this well, I mean, we look at, and we'll call Satan the enemy, or
Yeah,
we'll call it what it is. That's not his name. That's not the enemy per se. It is, but
yeah,
it's way bigger than that. But that is the main tool of this enemy, is deception, period.
it is.
And
And when we understand Satan as an allegory for evil, as opposed to
yes,
being the source of evil,
right.
then we lose the meaning,
Yeah,
and we don't understand why we're here. And again,
yeah,
churches can never tell you why we're here. What's our purpose?
yeah,
They can't tell you that. They can't tell you about things the Bible talks about. And so many churches, if you start asking questions and persist in those questions, they will ask you to leave
yeah.
because they don't want to talk about this.
They have these guardrails up that just can't,
Yeah.
that you can't, they're hard to break through.
Yeah.
So, yeah,
And you know, in the beginning, when I first started talking about some of these things, it was all a lot of it was new. And I would get responses back, but you know, you're talking about these bloodlines, but there's nothing in the Bible that talks about these bloodlines. And I'm going, why would you say that? Because they've been
yeah,
taught that there is nothing in the Bible that there might be another race, because they've redefined giants as just the taller of the humans, you know, maybe 6 feet tall versus 5'2" or something, all
right,
sorts of
right.
different ridiculous things like that.
Yeah,
But, you know, when you have something that's involved in Daniel 2:43, that I would encourage people to read the KJV on this if you don't, and do a Bible hub and compare it. You know, it talks about the end time and the time of these 10 kings of the seventh empire, the 10 toes. It says that these 10 kings, they shall mingle themselves with the seed of men.
mm,
If that doesn't sort of pop out at you and say, what
right.
the heck are they
Because
talking
otherwise,
about?
why would it be there?
Yes,
It's
yes,
not just like and this is, I think, this is the problem, is that people can't wrap their heads around this.
they can't.
So,
But then again, I mean, Psalms 21:8 through
yeah,
10 tells us, hey, we need to understand there's a seed war here. And starts with the curse in Genesis 3:15 is the curse of the seed of the serpent, not physically of the snake, but
right.
of the creation of the giants. And most of them, when they originally were created, were seraphim. There are other
Yeah.
ones that we talked about through cherubims and maybe some other ones, but they're the most dominant ones who populated most of the upper two classes of the Indo-Aryans, which means the noble ones, by the way.
Hmm.
So they tell
Right.
us who they are. And so Psalms 21:8, for people who don't think there's a seed line or a seed war, um, start in about verse 9, where well, no, let's start at 8, and I'll just read this. It says, "Thy right hand shall find out those that hate thee." And then in verse 9, it says, "Thou shalt make them as a fiery oven in the time of thine anger." So wrath, fire, destruction of the end time. "The Lord shall swallow them up in his wrath, and the fire shall devour them." We should not misunderstand what period of time this is going to be. When in verse 10 it says, "Their fruit shalt thou destroy from the earth, and their seed from among the children of men."
Mm.
These are the terrible ones that are talked about in Ezekiel 32.
Yeah.
And in Isaiah 25, this branch of those terrible ones are going to be destroyed on a mountain, which is going to be Mount Hermon.
Hermon, right.
Yeah.
Have you ever been there?
No, I've not. I'd love to go there though, just to see it.
Yeah.
And people will say, "Well, no, the battle's going to be at Armageddon." Well, the word assembly,
Yeah, right.
this is the mountain of the assembly, is Moad, as we get it in the more downstream version, and that IN apostrophe silences the G. So it would have been Moged, Har-Moged, Armageddon,
Right.
which is why John says you have to understand it in the Greek, not in the Greek,
Yeah.
but in the Hebrew.
Yeah, that's the other thing. Like people, if you go back, that it's the translation thing is a problem.
It is.
It can
Yeah,
be.
it can be. Yep.
And at the end of the day, you know, if they're reading a version that's not necessarily that's not telling the whole story, then you know, it's misleading.
Yeah.
So,
And I would suggest that all the English translations undervalue the complete story because
right.
they needed to make the Bible longer to express a fuller meaning to the word. Instead of
Right.
picking one word to try and capture a concept, they try and do it with one that is partial, but doesn't
Yeah.
cover it all. So the only way you can really get the full meaning, you can get the direction, but you don't get the fullness and importance at times of what's being talked about until you get into the larger sort of meaning of the Greek and of the Hebrew. But be very careful; you can't pick definitions that create a conflict, whether in that verse,
Right.
in
Correct.
in the sentence, in the narrative, in the chapter, or anywhere else in the Bible. Everything has to fit perfectly. And I know people won't use that standard, but that's the standard you have to have if you
Yeah.
want to get the full understanding.
So, kind of heading towards the off ramp here. How do we test theories about ancient gods and giants and
Yeah.
cryptids and UFOs and secret societies
Yep.
against scripture?
Yeah. Well, I think we can. We just have to understand scripture better.
Right.
Unfortunately, polytheists understand scripture better than Christians do.
Yeah, that's the truth.
You
Well,
know,
it's the you know, it's the Sun Tzu, you
yes,
know, you got to know your enemy.
yes,
And they know their enemy better than we do for sure, because I think it's been so twisted of actually who our enemy is.
yeah, and
That
and so they can use that expertise to sow misinformation, disinformation, to wedge issues for faith, cast doubt, because they know Christians haven't done the research, that they rely on the flock leaders who aren't teaching the whole Bible. I
yeah.
mean,
Oh yeah.
and you can't make that up. I mean, seminary schools are taught not to teach, or as they're teaching their ministers and the priests, whether it's Catholic, Protestant, whatever denomination you want to talk about, for the most part, on a 99% rule, they're told not to teach prehistory or prophecy.
Yeah.
So they create the opportunity to deceive us through getting control of the seminary schools. And then they flood the churches with polytheists and Gnostics and secret society members to put interpretive approach in, to start saying, well, you can't believe everything the Bible says. Well, have you thought about this? Have you thought about that? And all the while knowing that Christians haven't put on the full armor of God by reading the scripture in a way that is out without the lens of the wisdom of the world that they've been provided.
Yeah. Yeah. Man.
And that takes a
So
lot to create that scenario.
yeah, it does. It really does. So just to kind of get into this, like wrapping it up,
Yeah.
what do you believe is coming that most Christians are not prepared for?
Yeah, all of the false expectations of the end time and the
Yeah.
predictions, we're doing it to ourselves.
Shocker, right? Yeah.
Shocker, right? Well, they
Yeah.
prepared us to do that.
Yes.
And they've given us all of these wisdom of the world eschatology approaches.
Yeah.
And so they've got all Christians, when they do get into eschatology, fighting amongst each other. And they create hermeneutics to introduce the interpretive approach. And they get to rewrite scripture and prophecy any way that they want through the hermeneutics. And so they have created confusion, and they know they can't stop Christianity from existing, but they can sure make it weaker and ready for deception for the last 7 years of the things that are going to take place.
Hmm.
So that's the thing that Christians aren't prepared for, is how much they haven't been told.
Yeah.
And they don't understand that they've also been prepared to turn against each other.
Mm. I mean, you do see that already.
Yeah.
How easily it happens.
Yeah.
It's actually makes your head spin.
Well, we no longer live in a period, and maybe we never did, but um, where it is not proper. I mean, you don't have people just agree to disagree
Yeah.
within the church. They raise everything to a faith issue. And because they disagree with what you say, they'll call you a heretic. It's
Yeah.
like, it's unbelievable. I mean, we're to discuss things respectfully. We're never ever going to agree on a lot, but it's designed to encourage us to dig deeper and consider
Right.
what other people are saying, not to be easily persuaded into deception, but to test what we understand.
Yeah.
But it's been turned against us. So who are we going to turn to as the sorrows get worse, as the predictions of rapture come more often, the prediction that we're in the trumpets or the seals or whatever, that we're in World War III, and we're seeing just the birth pangs of that yet.
Yeah.
Our religious unity is broken, and our preparedness is broken for what's coming, and we will turn against each other because of these things that have been put in place. And it doesn't mean that there won't be a remnant that gets through this in terms
Right.
of all of this preparation, but there is going to be disappointment. There is going to
Oh yeah.
be um wringing of hands. There's I mean, I just can't imagine how the crushing aspect of it's not happening the way I wanted it to happen, because
Yeah.
that's
It's
it's the
that
biases of
expectation.
about, yeah, what I want to happen.
Hmm.
And so much of the church believes that it won't go through tribulation.
Yeah.
It's
Which I don't understand at all, but
Well, again, it goes back to redefining everything, because
yeah.
tribulation isn't just for the saints anymore. They make
Or like
tribulation as wrath. Th-
just something I've heard you talk about in the past, like the mark of the beast, right? And
Yeah,
so that, how is it that I don't understand how Christians don't think that they're going to be tested that way?
yeah,
Like that, that, that if you believe you're going to get whisked up to wherever and you don't have to go through that.
yeah,
To me, the way that I read
yeah.
things, that's your last test. Like that is
It
the test when the
could very well be.
rubber is put to the
Yeah,
road.
yeah,
Are you
and
going to choose God or are you going to choose the beast?
right,
And
and up to the point where you may not be left to make that decision, but
right,
you've had to put your mental position all the way through,
correct.
and be prepared to be killed for not taking that.
Right.
Now, some people will move that into a different sort of timing, but again, I'm not going to get into the minutia of some of the
No,
specifics,
right.
because it becomes a show of itself. But they rewrite what wrath and tribulation are.
Yeah.
And they rewrite what Jesus said. They rewrite anything, and they don't have scripture to back it up.
Yeah.
But
True.
they say, "Well, we're rightly dividing it," or "I got it from the Holy Spirit." But the Holy Spirit would never contradict what Jesus wrote. So don't
No.
stop rewriting what Jesus said. Put everything around what Jesus said, and you get rid of all of these sort of
Yeah.
contradictions. And also for people who, might be hearing this, who have been told to buy into some of these silly things, understand that the New Testament is very, very clear that tribulation is for the saints. And the wrath is reserved for those who bring tribulation on us.
Mhm.
There are two different terms. There's orge and thumas for wrath, and thlipsis for persecution, affliction, and tribulation for the saints. Doesn't mean that it's not awful, but we should
Right.
expect to at least go through some tribulation.
For sure.
And
Yeah. I
people
just,
and people will say, "Well, it's the last 7 years." Well, we don't have a term that says a 7-year tribulation period. Do we have
no.
terms that say 7 years? But none of them say tribulation. Do we have a term that says 7 years of wrath? We do not. Again, they're adding to it and saying, "Well, it has to be that because that's our
Yes.
preconceived conclusion."
Right. Yeah. So we have to know the Bible. I
You
mean,
have to
just,
know the Bible
you have to know the word.
and make your
Period.
decisions for yourself.
Yeah.
And when it comes to these types of things, my advice is really kind of simple, is, pray for a pre-trib wrap, prepare for a later rapture.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. That's what do they always say?
Yeah.
Hope for the best and expect the worst. Right.
Yes.
So
Put on your
I,
full
I
armor of
just
God.
read, and did an episode on the Testament of the Patriarchs, which is a non-canonical
Yep.
text, but I think it is a great read for folks that need to know what they were telling us back in those days. That is a very powerful text.
Yeah.
And I just urge everybody to find the testaments of the patriarchs and read that.
Yeah.
So,
And also bear this in mind as you remember the apostles and the disciples, is that when you read their writings in the New Testament, they you get a very distinct feeling they thought Jesus was returning in their lifetime,
yes. Well, many
right?
people will say that he did, but
And some people say that he did. You're correct. No scripture for it,
yes.
no other fact. But anyways, and and this is very strange when you look at that. But again, it's how we get into our own biases and belief systems, even if you're a disciple or an apostle. And what's also interesting about that, when Jesus established his church in Matthew 16, with Peter and the disciples, and then
Yeah.
gave them some knowledge of the crucifixion. He also provided them typology for what his second coming would look like, with glory and reward and with angels. And he said, some of you who are here today will see that coming and still be alive, right? So that's how they probably got there.
Yeah.
But because it didn't happen then, Jesus has created something that the world can't do.
Yeah.
He's going to have witnesses from the disciples in
Yeah.
the end time who are going to be here at that time of coming, just as you get that in the last chapter of the book of John with the disciple Jesus loved. So, I mean, and again, people are thinking, well, we're not going to be here then when Jesus comes, but yet his disciples are going to be.
Right. Hmm. Hmm.
So I guess we're better than the disciples.
I guess so.
I guess so.
I
We're
guess
more
so.
privileged.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I guess. My gosh. Gary, educational as always, my friend. Educational as always.
Well, thank you.
I definitely tell folks. Well, you know what? Let's end it with. I like for people to plant a seed. So go ahead, since the name of the show is Broadcasting Seeds. Go
Yeah.
ahead and plant a seed for the audience.
Yeah. So I think What we all should do is be planting seeds.
Agreed.
I'm going to start off with that. And you can learn as much as you want to, and you're not going to be able to convince people no matter what you say or how much scripture you're going to say. And it doesn't matter how good you're going to be at it. Don't be discouraged about that. People didn't believe what Jesus said.
Plenty.
Yes. So what he did was he planted seeds.
Mhm.
And those seeds grew into what Christianity is today. There's a lot of bad seeds and things like that, but he warned us about that as well. So think about this is that when you planting seeds, you want to plant seeds for people that when something may start to happen, you might start to understand it a little bit better. So my seed that I would plant is do not get super excited about the last 7 years being here until you see at least 3 things.
Yeah.
The first one is the false prophets. You have to have the false prophets to bring Babylon as the universal religion. No real special false prophets that are predicting. We see it in light versions today through the prophets of science, which is associated, but it's not at full level. But it's going to be convert to the true religion or be destroyed from the face of the earth. And we're
Mhm.
going to do contrived catastrophes for that. Will be the prophecies, and they'll lay out a number of them. So if we don't see false prophets, and even before they start doing the prophecies of doom, we need to see these real false prophets. We
Yeah.
need to see the coming together or very closely of the coming together of these 10 kingdoms, groups of nations, empires, trading blocks, alliances. Even though we're going through some wrangling right now, it's starting to move into how the world is going to react in terms of what's going on. We're not there yet today. So until we start to clearly see how we're going to have 10 kings who will mix their seed with the children of men.
Yes. Right.
We're not quite there yet, and until there's a resolution in terms of how we get from where we are today with the Jewish people and their temple and a wing on this temple, whichever temple it is that is being talked about in Daniel 9:27, till you get a resolution to the Islamic situation, you will never see the beginnings of the sacrifices being done on the wing of that temple. And
Yeah. On
they can
the
prepare
Mount of
as
Olives.
yep, and they can prepare the red heifers all they want
Yeah.
for to anoint that holy of holies for Jesus, but until you see those things start to come together,
Yeah.
we're not into this last 7 years. We're still in the sorrows. Do I think we're in the fig tree generation? Yes, but we're still in the sorrows and they're still working together and getting stronger.
Yep.
So that's the seed is when you start to see those main events, then you can start getting, okay, maybe rapture might be on the horizon, depending on what your position is, but it ain't tomorrow. It's not.
Yeah. I mean,
It
that's a long way from where we're at. I
it
mean, it
is.
really is. Now, it can happen quickly, but it's still not that quickly. Like,
Exactly.
I mean that you bring up a great thing, and this is what I tell my family and friends is you have a huge Islamic problem when you're talking
Yep.
about the Jewish state and
Yep.
that prophecy. There is a huge problem there. And
Yep.
I mean, it's more than just like Israel can deal with on its
Yeah.
own. And
Yeah.
I mean, Israel as the nation state. Now, like there's a problem there.
It's a it
They're
it's a global seismic shift that has to take
correct.
place
Correct.
to
I
make
mean,
that happen.
gigantic.
Yes,
So,
so to speak, yes.
yeah. No
Now
pun intended there.
now one short-term seed as well. I'm not prescient in any way. I'm
Yeah.
speculating when I do this, but putting the details together. So when you see humans viewed as competitors for the lifeblood of AI,
Hmm.
That's when we're getting closer. And what do I mean by that? AI and its data centers needs an incredible amount of water and electricity, all of which we don't have enough. So we will become a competitor to that, even though they're trying to addict us on electricity to make the catastrophe even
Yeah.
greater. And what do I mean by that? Well, in 2023, the US complete output for electricity siphoned off 4% of its grid for the development of AI in the data centers.
Yes.
This year it's 6%, so it's
Yep.
doubled. By 2030, 2028, it's going to be 10%. By 2030, it's projected to be somewhere between 20 and 30%. By 2035, it's going to be 40 to 50%. These are the government projections as I put together
Yep.
different sort of reports. They don't have an ability to do that.
Well, they don't have the
and
resources.
they don't have the water.
No, they don't have the resources. I'm one of my former lives, just so I put it that way,
Yeah.
was spent in the nuclear industry.
Yeah.
And the bottom line is this: it's the only way that they could do that is through, in my opinion, is through nuclear.
Yes.
Now, with that being said, too, they haven't built a nuclear plant in the United States since 1982.
Yeah.
So-
And the approval would take 10 years.
10 years. And they've so here's the thing is people don't realize that you've had dozens of applications for approval.
Yeah.
All have been denied.
Yeah.
Over the past since 1980s.
Yeah.
So
how do we get
how do we get there if we don't, not even to say that the fastest you're going to build one of those plants is like 6-7 years.
Yeah.
The fastest.
Yeah. There has to be an instantaneous upgrade in technology and capability to build to even sort of get there in the next 10 years to where it would have to be.
Well, who knows? Who knows who's going to show up?
Yeah.
To bring us that technology.
Yeah, we might have, Naquita reactors or something like out of the Stargate series.
Exactly.
So you can't rule out, but the normal, even with the advancements we're having today, we can't develop that AI fast enough. And we know what happened just over a year ago at Davos is the whole world got marching orders. We can't implement our implant system and the new world order system we want until the AI has the technology in place to go to the next level. And everybody went back and doubled down. And we're seeing rapid advancement, but now you're choked at how far you can develop it without turning off and browning out all of the humans from the supply of electricity.
And we just had an emergency meeting of Bilderberg. So
yes, why an emergency meeting? Yes.
Why an emergency meeting?
They need to get new marching orders quickly on something.
Something's going on. So
yeah.
So Gary, again, tell everyone, are you done planting seeds?
Yes.
Tell everyone where they can find you. Plant that last seed.
Yes. So if you like what I'm saying and want to get a hold of me or support me, the best way to do that is to go to my website, the Genesis6conspiracy.com. That's Genesis 6 with the number 6conspiracy.com. On that website, there is a generous excerpt of all 98 chapters of book 1, all 84 chapters of book 2. I have a small write-up there on the Primo Conspiracy. I'll do more once I get the Kindle version linked up when the Audible version is ready by the end of the month and get it completed. But you can go to the Buy Now page if you want to support me, and I do not accept monies through donations. I do accept monies if I speak at a conference. If it makes money, I will accept money. But those are the only two ways. So if you like what I say, want to support me, and you like what the books sound like, then you go to the Buy Now page. Buy page 1 is for book 1. Buy page 2 is for book 2. Buy page 3 is for the Primo Conspiracy. Buy page 4 is the bundling with discounts for books 1 and 2. Buy page 5 is bundling for all 3 with discounts. You also have on there an icon to contact me. Also, there's an icon or a link over, on the buy pages for Amazon.com, Amazon.ca, BarnesandNoble.com for the Kindle and Audible links for books 1 and book 2, and soon for the Primo Conspiracy.
Amazing. All right, Gary, thank you so much for coming back on, and I'm sure we'll do it again.
Terrific.
Before you know
It was fun.
it. Take care. I love it. Take care.
There's a shadow on the mountain. There's a whisper in the stone. Old kings carve their names in blood, where the sons of heaven roamed. They came down dressed in thunder, with fire behind their eyes, built their thrones on broken men, and taught the world to lie. And the wise men called it legend, the priests called it myth, but the bones beneath the altar say there's something buried with it. It's the bloodline of the flood, running deep beneath the ground. It's the old gods wearing crowns, trying not to make a sound. It's the same war, same lie, same serpent in the mud. When the days of Noah come again, you'll see the bloodline of the flood. They named them gods in Greece and Rome. In Canaan, Baal took the flame. Different tongues, different temples, but the stories stayed the same. Giants walked through ancient cities. Kings were born from forbidden fire. And the children of rebellion built an empire on desire. Atlantis sank in judgment. Babylon rose in pride. And every age that followed kept the old dream alive. It's the bloodline of the flood, running deep beneath the ground. It's the old gods wearing crowns, trying not to make a sound. It's the same war, same lie, same serpent in the mud. When the days of Noah come again, you'll see the bloodline of the flood. Oh, they call it progress, they call it life. They dress the beast in silver and sell it as divine. But there's a king above the council, there's a throne above their throne, and every fallen kingdom There's a shadow on the mountain, but the light is breaking through. The giant